Iraqi central bank heist. In March 2003, just hours before the United States invaded Iraq, something unbelievable happened. Nearly $1 billion vanished from the country's central bank. There were no masked robbers crashing through the front doors, no dramatic shootouts, and definitely no one hanging from the ceiling on a rope like in a movie. Instead, the biggest bank robbery in history began with a handwritten note. That note came from Saddam Hussein himself. According to Iraqi officials, he ordered his son, Qusay Hussein, to withdraw almost $1 billion in cash from the central bank. Imagine walking into your bank and asking to withdraw your savings, except your savings happened to be enough money to fill an entire warehouse. The bank employees had little choice. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with absolute power, and refusing his order could have cost them far more than their jobs. So they opened the vaults and started moving stacks of cash. It wasn't a quick process either. The money was packed into wooden crates and loaded onto trucks one after another. By the end of the operation, around $920 million had disappeared from the bank. Just moving that much money was a challenge. $1 million in $100 bills weighs about 10 kilograms. Multiply that hundreds of times, and suddenly you're transporting several tons of cash. This wasn't something you could throw into the trunk of a car. It took large trucks, plenty of workers, and several hours. If there were an award for most exhausting robbery, this one would be hard to beat. Saddam reportedly wanted the money hidden before coalition forces reached Baghdad. Cash is much easier to move than gold bars, and unlike buildings or factories, it can disappear almost overnight. From his point of view, keeping billions locked inside a bank that might soon be captured wasn't exactly a great backup plan. A few weeks later, Baghdad fell. Coalition troops searched Saddam's palaces and government buildings. What they found was astonishing. Hidden behind walls, inside bunkers, and stacked in rooms were mountains of cash. Soldiers discovered hundreds of millions of dollars wrapped in plastic and stored in boxes. It looked less like a bank vault and more like someone had turned an entire palace into the world's biggest piggy bank. Even after those discoveries, not all of the money was recovered. Large amounts are still missing today, and no one knows exactly where every dollar ended up. Some may have been stolen during the chaos of the war. Some may have been hidden in secret locations that have never been found. Others may simply have vanished into the hands of people who saw an opportunity during one of the most unstable periods in Iraq's history. Unlike most famous robberies, this one didn't rely on clever disguises, underground tunnels, or sophisticated gadgets. It happened because one of the most powerful men in the country gave an order that no one dared refuse. In the end, nearly $1 billion disappeared almost overnight, making the Iraqi central bank heist the largest bank robbery ever recorded in human history. Antwerp Diamond Heist. On a quiet weekend in February 2003, one of the most secure buildings in the world was completely cleaned out. By the time anyone realized what had happened, diamonds, gold, jewelry, and other valuables worth more than $100 million had disappeared. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was years of planning carried out by a small group of thieves who made almost no mistakes. The target was the Antwerp Diamond Center in Belgium. Antwerp is often called the diamond capital of the world, with billions of dollars worth of gems passing through the city every year. If you wanted to protect priceless diamonds, this was the place to do it. The vault was protected by steel doors, motion sensors, heat detectors, magnetic locks, security cameras, and alarms. It sounded impossible to break into. That only made it more tempting. The man behind the operation was an Italian thief known as Leonardo Notarbartolo. Instead of rushing in, he spent nearly 3 years pretending to be a legitimate diamond merchant. He rented an office in the building, greeted people every day, and slowly earned their trust. To everyone else, he looked like just another businessman. In reality, he was quietly studying every camera, every alarm, and every routine. When the weekend finally arrived, his team put the plan into action. They slipped into the building and began defeating the security systems one by one. They covered motion sensors, disabled alarms, and carefully opened the massive vault without setting off the building's defenses. It was the kind of job that looked more like engineering than robbery. Inside the vault were hundreds of safety deposit boxes. The thieves didn't waste time trying to open everything. They focused on the boxes they believed held the most valuable diamonds and jewelry. Within a few hours, they had filled bags with millions of dollars worth of treasures and disappeared into the night. By Monday morning, the vault looked as if a tornado had passed through it. For a short time, it seemed like the perfect crime. Then one small mistake changed everything. While getting rid of evidence, one of the thieves dumped trash in a nearby forest instead of destroying it. Police searched the bags and found tiny clues, including receipts, food packaging, and pieces of security equipment. One fingerprint eventually led investigators to Notarbartolo. Although several members of the gang were arrested, much of the stolen treasure was never recovered. To this day, millions of dollars worth of diamonds are still missing. Some investigators believe they were quietly sold on the black market. Others think they may still be hidden somewhere, waiting for the right moment to reappear. The Antwerp diamond heist became one of history's most famous robberies because it proved that even the strongest vault can be defeated. Sometimes the biggest weakness isn't the lock on the door. It's giving a patient thief enough time to learn exactly how that lock works. Banco Central Bank heist. In August 2005, people walking through the Brazilian city of Fortaleza had no idea that one of the greatest robberies in history was happening right beneath their feet. While traffic moved overhead and businesses carried on as usual, a group of criminals was digging a tunnel toward a bank vault. They weren't making noise with explosives or smashing through walls. They were slowly working underground, one shovel at a time. The target was the Banco Central branch, where huge amounts of cash were stored. Breaking through the front door would have been impossible, so the gang came up with a different plan. They rented a nearby building and turned it into what looked like a landscaping business. To everyone else, it was just another small company selling grass and plants. The fake business gave them the perfect excuse for trucks, tools, and workers coming and going without attracting attention. Behind closed doors, however, the real work had nothing to do with gardening. Over the next 3 months, the gang secretly dug a tunnel that stretched nearly 80 meters, or about 260 feet, from their rented building to the bank. The tunnel was surprisingly advanced. It had electric lights, wooden supports to stop it from collapsing, and even a ventilation system so the workers could breathe underground. At that point, it was less like digging a hole and more like building a subway line on a very tiny budget. When the tunnel finally reached the bank vault, the thieves waited for a weekend. They broke through the vault floor and found exactly what they were looking for. Inside were stacks of Brazilian banknotes that had not yet entered circulation. Since the money hadn't been officially released, many of the bills couldn't easily be traced. That made the robbery even more attractive. The gang worked carefully, loading cash into bags and carrying it back through the tunnel. By the time they finished, they had stolen around 164 million Brazilian reyes, worth roughly $70 million at the time. The cash weighed several tons, so getting it all out wasn't exactly a quick sprint. Imagine carrying bags full of money through a narrow tunnel for hours. It sounds exciting until you remember your back would probably disagree. When bank employees returned after the weekend, they found a giant hole in the vault floor instead of a mountain of cash. Investigators were stunned. There were no signs of a violent break-in, no damaged front doors, and no dramatic chase. The thieves had simply appeared from below, taken the money, and vanished the same way. Police eventually arrested several members of the gang, but recovering the stolen fortune proved much harder. Some of the money was found, yet tens of millions of dollars were never recovered. Investigators believe much of it was spent, hidden, or laundered before they could track it down. The Banco Central Bank heist remains one of the most impressive robberies ever carried out. It wasn't successful because of advanced technology or incredible luck. It succeeded because of patience, planning, and months of hard work carried out where almost nobody thought to look, deep underground.